Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Andre and I'm your bookworm, and today we are back on the book reviews. We are also back to a book that is part of a series that we started here on the channel, and the series is Shadows of the Apt. The author is Adrian Tchaikovsky and the book itself is The Sea Watch. For the ones that don't know, The Sea Watch is the sixth book of the Shadows of the Apt series, written by Adrian Tchaikovsky, who is more famous for his science fiction books, which some of them are right here, these three, which are Children of Time, Children of Ruin, Children of Memory. There's also a fourth one that has come out called Children of Strife. I have not read that one. I've read those three, they're very good, but we're not talking about his science fiction works. We're talking about his fantasy debut series, which is Shadows of the Apt. I've read the first 5 books, I have reviewed them all here on the channel. You can check them out through the thumbnails or the cards up above. But today we are getting onto this 6th book, which is past halfway of the series, considering it has 10 books. What we have to say in particular about this book? Well, it was published in 2011, so it's celebrating its 15th year this year, and at the time it wasn't nominated to any awards. It didn't win anything because it wasn't nominated, but that is kind of expected. I think his science fiction works are a lot more famous, they get those awards, whereas his fantasy series is kind of underhyped and goes under the radar for a lot of people. And you can see that on Goodreads, because this book has just over 3,000 ratings. Considering it's been out for 15 years, that's not a lot. And I can also imagine a lot of people started reading the first ones and then they kind of gave up. And so, but to the people that are reaching the 6th, it's only those 3,500 more or less. However, the average score it has is a 4 out of 5, a perfect 4 out of 5. So that is not good, not bad. It's sitting on the usual range where fantasy books sit, although it's leaning towards the lower end of that range, but still it bodes well for the series. Now, before I jump into the review, I have 2 housekeeping items to discuss. You know them. The first one is the synopsis. I'm going to narrate the synopsis to you. If you don't want to hear anything about it, you can skip to the next timestamp, which will be the start of our review, starting with our categories, the plot. Otherwise, you can stick around, hear what this book is about, get some context, and just hear my voice, I guess. Danger lurks beneath the dark waters. The shadow is falling over Collegium. Despite the tenuous peace, Stenwald Maker knows that the Empire will return for his city. Even as he tries to prepare for the resurgence of the Black and Gold Army, a hidden threat is working against his people. Ships that sail from Collegium's harbor are being attacked, sunk by pirates. Some just go missing. Lulled by the spread of lies and false promises, Stenwald's allies are falling away. He faces betrayal on every side, and the Empire is just waiting for the first sign of weakness to strike. But they are not the only power that has its eyes on Collegium, and even with all their military strength and technology, they may not be powerful enough to stave off the forces massing in the darkness. Alright, with the synopsis out of the way, the second housekeeping item is just look at the scores of the previous books, so we have a context of how this series is fading. And as you can see by the scores, it's being a bit of an up and down. It's been kind of a roller coaster. We started off with a 3.8, which it isn't a great start. But with the second book, we climbed to a 4, which is good. It went in the right direction. However, the third book had a huge drop to a 3.2. And then the fourth and fifth books, they kind of climbed back up to a 3.8, stabilized a bit there. But as you can see, the books have a lot of problems. And it's all in different categories depending on the book. For example, book 3 suffered a lot due to the plot. It was a circular plot. I did not enjoy it at all. Other times, we have problems with characters because it feels a bit too telenovela. But that's something that I will be discussing in this book. But so just so you have an idea, this is how the scores are. Will this 6th book do better or worse? Let's find out. Okay, so the first category is plot. And in this book, we follow characters that we weren't following in the previous book. What do I mean by this? I think the first 4 books were one arc where we had the invading army from the Wasp Empire coming in. We saw the resolution of that. And then the 5th book happens a space of time after. Space of time, that makes no sense. A segment of time, a bit of time after those events. And in the 5th book, we follow some characters from the previous arc. In this 6th book, we follow other characters from the same arc, but they are in different spaces, and we kind of follow a different story. This is good because we know who the characters are already. We follow this new plot, that keeps things engaging, and if we don't really like the plot of the previous book, that's okay because we left that behind. We might revisit it at some point, because I think the 7th book will follow another set of characters, and then maybe the 8th, 9th, 10th book, we kind of see them converging again and getting to that big climax of the series. But this is just conjecture, I'm not sure. What matters is, this 6th book, we follow Stenwald Maker and his partner. Now, Stenwald Maker has been a character that is quite big in the series. He is kind of the catalyst of everything that has happened. So it's good to get him back on the spotlight, even though he is mostly in Collegium. And in this book, we see him going into other places. I don't want to spoil too much. There will be some spoilers, though, especially in regards to his partner. But that's more in the character category. For now, regarding the plot was interesting. It went in directions that I was not expecting. And it was a good direction, I feel. It kept things interesting, especially in regards to the world building. However, I wouldn't say that the plot was super complex. It was plot twisty in the same way that other books can be. It was quite simple. However, in its simpleness, it did everything well. And the fact that it was linking certain plot lines from book 3, I think, back into its relevance and coming out in the open, I thought that was quite good. It just shows that the author doesn't leave things in the air just so like different plot lines that are just left up in the air for us to imagine things. No, he actually grabs them a lot later for us to develop and be interested in this part of the world. And I think that by adding this layer of complexity, it didn't make things confusing, which tends to happen if you add too many layers, that things become just too complex. It wasn't this case. I think the layers of complexity that were added were simple in a way. It's a bit of a paradox, but it made things better because it added more parts of this battle, this war that is engaging between Collegium or the Lowlands and everyone else. The best way I could describe it is the plot felt like a Sunday afternoon movie in the sense that it was a bit predictable, but I think it was done well in the sense that it added the things it needed to add to the overall plot of the series without making it too predictable or too complex. So I'm gonna give it a score of 4 out of 5. All right, so the next category is characters. And like I said, in this book, we follow mostly Stenwald Maker and his partner. And this part, there might be a bit of spoilers, so if you want to skip a minute or two, feel free to do so. But the thing about characters is that in this book, we don't see that much of that partner because the partner dies kind of a third of the way through. And regarding that comes one of my biggest criticisms, which is the characters don't seem to be affected by big events. And what do I mean by this? This partner died, Stenwald Maker thinks about it maybe once or twice throughout the book, and then the rest of the book he kind of never mentions it, which feels very wrong because if you actually love that partner, you would think about it more, that seeing her die would affect you so much, and that kind of doesn't happen. And this has been a recurring thing where big events happen to characters, but they don't have big effects on them. And this is sad because it's one of the best opportunities for characters to develop, to have arcs related to their development, in the sense of them going either through grief, through revenge, all of those cycles that are useful to make the plot move forward. And then the other thing I don't really enjoy about these books is how telenovela-ish the romances feel. And what do I mean by this? Again, we saw this in the previous book where certain characters do fall in love very quickly. And I think so far in the whole series, there has only been one romance that makes a bit of sense. And that's mostly because they keep going back and forth throughout the books. And the fifth one, they kind of cemented a bit more of that relationship. But aside from that, it feels like everyone just falls in love very quickly and just suddenly becomes madly in love. And I know that there is some world building aspects related to magic to these romances, but still, I think it could have been done in a subtler way or taken a bit more time for that to become so apparent. But aside from the romances, I think the characters were developed well, the new ones that we were introduced to, and even Stenwald and the partners that he travels with, I think they all were charismatic. They had their roles, and I think the roles were done quite well. They were able to develop quite a bit, especially again the people that were surrounded Stenwald Maker, and even Stenwald. I think he developed a bit more throughout the struggles that he was facing at the start of the book. And I think all of this makes the characters feel a bit more real, which is always what we want. So for this category, I'm going to give it a 4- out of 5. Let's move on to world building, which is the category that has remained the most stable throughout the whole series. It's gotten mostly a 4 throughout, and I think in this book it's no exception. Adrian Tchaikovsky did well and adding more complexity to the world and also connecting parts that had come around from previous books. In this case, and this might be a bit of a spoiler, there are civilizations under the sea that have their own peoples, their own cultures, their own politics, and their own magic systems or kind of magic in them or aptness. Like there's these two different, not really magics in this world, but there's the magic and the apt. And so This adds a whole layer of complexity to the world that makes it feel more real, and it still makes a lot of sense in Adrian Tchaikovsky's universe, in the sense that all the different populations are associated with different insects. Or I should stop saying the insects, because truly they aren't only insects, they're more like arthropods, meaning that this time around, I mean, not only arthropods, because now there's also jellyfishes. So things are starting to become bigger and not only restricted to insects, but that's a different conversation. Actually, we could do a whole video of should we have remained only in insects, or this open up of different classes of animals and other things that I don't want to reveal. But anyways, I think it was well done in regards to this book. It added the complexity it needed to add. It created new dynamics. It made everything a lot fresher, because suddenly we have these things that we didn't know about, or we had heard a bit about, but we didn't know much, and now we know a lot. And at the same time, it did not feel like a Deus Ex Machina like the previous book had felt, where we were introduced to a new race. However, that race seemed just overpowered and almost like gods. This one wasn't like that. They felt like at the same level as Stenwell Maker and the Beetle Kingdom or the Wasp Kingdom and everything else, except we get to know a lot more about the way they develop. So in this category, I applaud Adrian Tchaikovsky, and I think he did really well. I am very curious on how he will maintain this and create all of these interactions for the remaining of the books in this series. But for now, I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5. Alright, so let's move on to our last technical category, which is writing style. I feel like Adrian Tchaikovsky's writing style has been improving slowly over the books. I mean, I still think he has some weaknesses, like the romances that I keep mentioning, but in regards to the technical parts of the writing style, I think he does it quite well. We have a prose that is simple, direct, doesn't have a lot of flourishes, but it does the role that it needs to do, and the pacing is really good as well. It has these ups and downs. Especially I feel like this book, it allowed us to have lows where we get to know a bit more of the characters or the world, those exposition parts, without being too info dumpy. So I enjoyed the way he was doing it, and there was quite a lot of action scenes. If I had to criticize anything about his writing, it's just the way how he differentiates the magic from the apt being apt. Because even though I'm on the 6th book, I still think that it could be clearer. I understand what the difference is, but I think from the 1st book onwards, it's still a bit gray area kind of thing, a bit cloudy in terms of how much overlap, or if there is any overlap at all. But then again, I feel like that is more a personal preference rather than a criticism of his writing. And regarding the themes of this book, I don't think there wasn't any big theme that was being discussed or just explained in this book. But then again, we don't always need to have themes. I know that I prefer when a book has a theme and explores it, but I understand as well that not every book needs to have it. Especially these ones that feel a lot like a Sunday afternoon movie, where we're here for the story, for the action, and we're just kind of enjoying it without having to think a lot about it. And I think the story does it. The world building is good, the plot is good, the characters kinda, but the action also is enjoyable, and so doesn't need any big theme to be explored. So for this category, I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5. And finally, our last category, which is enjoyment. Did I enjoy this book? I did. My enjoyment wasn't over the moon, but at the same time, it wasn't like I was dreading to read this book. I was curious with this new dynamic, and because we were also exploring Stenwell Maker, who is one of the characters that I like the most in this series, then I was quite curious when I started it. And besides, with this new layer of the world building, that kind of kept my enjoyment going, because I'm a sucker for world building, and so when we're discovering more things about a world, that's when I get engaged, especially because at the same time, it's somewhat related to biology, which is my field, so those two ticks on this book made my enjoyment keep going and keep me wanting to read more. And besides, I think the plot this time around was engaging enough that wants me to keep reading, even though the characters were a bit annoying and were just making me a little bit, but that didn't detract from the enjoyment. But like I said, I'm curious to see how the series will go from here, how Adrian Tchaikovsky will keep developing all of these interactions, and to see where he's going to take it next. Because like I said, I think the next book we will explore different characters, and maybe the 8th book as well, and then the 9th and 10th will be when everything converges into a big epic battle, I hope. But let's see how he is able to wrap up everything. But so overall, I would say for this category, I'm going to give a 4 out of 5. It was a good enjoyment. I wasn't ever just wanting to read this book to the max, but at the same time, I wasn't dreading reading it. So it's sitting at the 4, a good amount of enjoyment. And that leads us to the end of our review. Just as a refresher, we had 4 for plot, 4 minus for characters, 5 for world building, 4 for writing style, and 4 for enjoyment, which gives us a final score of 4.2 out of 5, or a 4.1 if you want to take a point for that minus in the character category, but you know what I mean. I think this score is actually quite surprising because it means it is the best book of the series so far, which I was not expecting it to be. I thought the second book would be probably my favorite, but this one is a very good book. I really enjoyed it. I loved how Adrian Tchaikovsky was able to add complexity without making it confusing. But I mean, if the books keep going in this direction, and as we approach the end of the series and the culmination of everything, if the scores keep going up, I will only be happy for it. Now, the question is, do I recommend this book? That is a hard question because if I were just to recommend this book, I would say it's a pretty good book. It's entertaining. However, for you to read this book, you need to read the previous 5, which can be quite a task for just this book. So what I'm going to do is put it aside, and once I read a bit more and figure out if those other books forward are good as well, then I will definitely recommend the series as a whole, considering you'll have to go through a bit of a rough patch. But if the other ones aren't good, then it might not be worth reading it and just move on to his science fiction works. But let me know, what do you think? Do you agree with me? Do you think this one is one of his best books? I mean, I know people are saying that the series only gets better as we approach the end, and that everything kind of connects and makes sense when Adrian Tchaikovsky puts everything together. So I'm very curious to see if that actually happens. But if you know, comment down below. What do you think of this book? Do you like it, do you not? And if you're new, don't forget, subscribe, like the content, and you shall be seeing me on Thursdays and Sundays, okay? See you soon.